tell you this because in the 1940s, this is exactly what the scientists were trying to create. For years, materials were collected and scientists worked on how to create this bomb. In 1942, two plants built reactors to create plutonium, and also electromagnetic centrifuge and gaseous diffusion plants were built to produce uranium-235. In 1943, raw materials were very much being created, but then bomb design had to be thought about. In 1944, bomb models were tested, and later that year, dummy bombs called pumpkins were dropped in tests. In early 1945, leaders Roosevelt, Churchill, and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin all met to discuss the imminent end of the war. Not long after the American leader died, his last words were, "I have a terrific headache." A few months later, and a plutonium implosion bomb was tested in New Mexico. The new President Truman then told Stalin that America had an ace in the hole, a bomb like no other. On July 26, President Truman, Chinese President Chiang Kai-shek, and the new British Prime Minister Clement Attlee issued the Potsdam Proclamation to Japan, asking that the country give up the fight and surrender. A few days later, and Japan replied, "No." As you know, on August 6th, the little man was dropped, and 3 days later, Nagasaki was hit. On August 14th, Japan surrendered. That's the end of the Manhattan Project, a multilingual global project that cost a ton of money and human life. In case you're wondering how all that science fit into one place at the end of the day, it goes a bit like this. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima acted a bit like a gun. It was tube-shaped with half of a nuclear charge at one end and the other half, the moving part, at the other end. A normal explosive charge was put behind the moving part, and you might say that was the near end of the barrel. When the charge was detonated, the bullet went down the tube and hit the charge at the other end, sometimes called the spike. Then the two halves of the nuclear materials were brought together and held together, and the result of this was a chain reaction. The fuel became what's called supercritical, and the explosion came next. The Manhattan Project was both a success and a bloody wart on the history of mankind.